Dividing radical expressions, you need to keep in mind two things. It always needs to be in simple radical form. And simple radical form, there are two conditions that need to be met. Number one, there are no radicals in the denominator. So no radicals in the denominator. Number two, the radicands in the numerator are as small as possible. The radicands in the numerator are as small as possible. Okay, so keeping that in mind, we are going to write everything in simple radical form today. We have the square root of 5 divided by the square root of 7. Well, our radicand is in simple radical form, or as small as possible. However, we have a radical in the denominator. So we need to multiply by 1, but remember we get to pick what the 1 looks like, and we'll take our q from the denominator. So we'll multiply by the square root of 7 over the square root of 7. So this gives us the square root of 35 divided by square root of 7 times square root of 7 is square root of 49, which is 7. Please do not reduce the 35 and the 7. This is not the number 35. It is square root of 35. Totally different number, so these don't reduce. Okay, so let's take a look at something like 8 divided by the square root of 24. Again, we have a radical in the denominator, and it's not simplified either. So let's simplify this guy first. So 24 turns into, let's see, 24 written and prime factorization would be 2 times 2 times, oh boy, there's a lot to choose. I have to do it by hand. So 2, 12, 2, 6, 2, 3. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. So I've got a set of 2's. So this would be 2 square root of 6. Which reduces our fraction 4 over the square root of 6. Now we still have the radical in the denominator, so let's multiply by 1. So that gives us 4 square root of 6 over 6, and reduce the fraction a little bit further since it can. Now you're good to go. Remember these? All right, let's take a look at what happens when we have a binomial in the denominator. So let's look at something like 35 divided by the square root of 8 minus the square root of 3. So we have a binomial here, which means we can't multiply by the 1 like a square root of 3 over square root of 3 or a square root of 8 over square root of 8. We're going to multiply by the conjugate. Remember that word, maybe? The conjugate means the opposite operation. So this is subtraction. We're going to multiply by a binomial with addition. So the square root of 8 plus the square root of 3. Square root of 8 plus the square root of 3. And the conjugate is helpful because when you do your distributing or FOIL, if that helps you keep track of everything, you'll have square root of 8 times square root of 8 is 8 minus the square root of 24 plus the square root of 24 minus the square root of 9, which is 3. Look what happens. Your square roots are gone, so your denominator is just 8 minus 3, or 5. And it'll happen every time when you use the conjugate. So 5 is our denominator. We have 35 times the quantity square root of 8 plus square root of 3. Before you distribute, look at the 35 and the 5. They reduce. So we have 7 times the quantity square root of 8 plus square root of 3. Now we can distribute. 7 square root of 8 plus 7 square root of 3. And I hope you're getting a little uncomfortable with square root of 8. That's not totally simplified. 8 breaks down to 2 times 2 times 2. Right? So we have 7 square root of 2 times 2 times 2. So that actually makes it 14 square root of 2. Plus 7 square root 3. These are not like radicals, so this is your completely simplified answer, simple radical form. So that's how that works. We can do one more if you like. We can do, let's do a binomial. We'll just do one radical in the denominator. but it's still binomial. So again, since it's a binomial, you need to pick your conjugate. So we're going to multiply by the square root of 6. Instead of addition, we're going to use subtraction. Square root of 6 minus 2. And so the denominator, when we multiply through, we've got 6, right? Square root of 6 times square root of 6 is 6. Minus 2 square root of 6 plus 2 square root of 6, so those subtract out. Then we've got 2 times negative 2, so negative 4. So 6 minus 4, or 2. So our new denominator is 2, and then we've got 20 times the square root of 6 minus 2. Again, look, your 2 and your 20 reduce. So we've got 10 times the square root of 6 minus 2, or 10 square root of 6 minus 20. Square root of 6 is simplified completely, so we're good to go. There you go. Happy practicing.